Hello, I want to welcome you to this very special program sponsored by the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire Chapter. My name is Jamar Brown, and I will serve as your host and moderator as we address one of the most significant issues affecting today's youth, bullying. Today, we are going to get clear on what bullying is, its effects on the youth of today, and most importantly, what children as well as parents can do to end or at the very least prevent bullying. Before we get started, I would like to share a very special message from the president of the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire Chapter, Gentleman Damon Alexander.
Hello, I am Damon Alexander, president of the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire Chapter. In addition to our commitment to provide positive role models to our African American youth, we are committed to using our resources to address and provide solutions to the most significant issues affecting our community. Today, we're going to address that issue that has become an epidemic in our society, bullying. Most people conjure up ideals or images of bullying as the kid in the schoolyard taking the lunch money. But thanks to the intervention of cyberspace, aka the internet, texting, and other forms of mass instant communication, bullying has evolved into so much more. Our organization would like to be at the forefront of finding ways to help parents and children better understand, address, prevent, and heal from the effects of bullying. On the behalf of the gentlemen of the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire Chapter, we want to thank you for watching.
Welcome back. Before I introduce our very distinguished panel, I wanted to share some data which really shows how significant of a problem bullying really is. I spoke to experts that have studied bullying for years, as well as spent several hours online researching bullying statistics. Here is just a sample of what I learned from websites such as stopbullying.gov, bullyingstatistics.org, and antibullying.com. As much as 77% of children have been victims of at least one type of bullying. 160,000 children miss school every day due to bullying. 282,000 children are attacked in high schools throughout the nation each and every single month. 70% of children have witnessed at least one bullying incident. 1 out of 10 students either drops out or changes schools due to bullying. There's also a very strong correlation between bullying and those that commit crimes and end up incarcerated. What about suicide rates? Well, a child that's bullied is called bullycide and is rising at an alarming rate. And also, this is very important, 1 in 20 students have seen another student bring a gun to school, and we know that violence at schools due to bullying is rising each and every single day. Bullying is an issue that needs real understanding, real solutions, and real action right now. To help us address these issues, let's meet our guests. David Lewis is the Executive Director of the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation. He is spearheading the Anti-Bullying Institute in Riverside, California. The Institute's purpose is to address the bullying epidemic by providing hands-on programs for parents, children, and the school system. Shirley Zink is the founder of KidsAreFirst.com and Simple Acts of Care and Kindness. For 11 years, she has been the director of the World Youth Conference, and earlier this year was presented with the National Anti-Bullying Award by the National School Safety Council. As a mother, grandmother, and wife of 49 years, Shirley has a personal story that all parents need to hear. Dr. E.M. Abdul-Momin is a licensed clinical and forensic psychologist and the founder and CEO of the Du Bois Institute, which is a nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering youth and families. Dr. Abdul-Momin is a principal investigator and director of the Riverside County Mental Health Contract, Building Resilience in African American Families, a prevention and early intervention program that focuses on youth, parents, and families. He has over 30 years of university-level teaching experience and is especially known for his work and commitment to assisting disadvantaged inner-city youth, families, college and university students, and incarcerated youth. And he is also the chair of the Education Committee for the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire Chapter. Everyone, welcome to today's program.
Thank you.
Obviously you have a lot of expertise in the field of anti-bullying and bullying prevention, but we have a lot of parents that are watching this program. We have children that are watching this program, and I really want to make this program about what we can share with them to help parents deal with this issue, that are struggling with it, to help children deal with this issue. So before we dive into your professional approach to anti-bullying or to bullying prevention, let's take 30 seconds and have each of you share why bullying is such a personal issue for you. And Shirley, I know you have a very important story, so let's start with you.
Well, my husband and I have 2 children. My son, Stephen, had some very difficult times when he was in school. He was bullied and picked on when he was in elementary school, and that led to depression. And it was an undiagnosed depression. We took him to counselors because we knew that he was starting to do things that needed to have some help, but it wasn't recognized as depression at the time. And then when he did graduate from high school, which was very difficult because he didn't really see any point. When you're depressed, you don't see a point of going further. One of the questions that's always asked is, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And when he was asked that, he couldn't come up with anything. On his 19th birthday, he had a relationship with a person that was not being very successful, and he was in the process of having to break it off, and he felt he couldn't live with that. And so he put a 22 in his mouth and took his own life. Being a parent of a child who has taken their own life is a whole animal all by itself in the world of grief, because there is tremendous guilt. Why didn't I see this? Why didn't I? What could I have done that would have prevented it? People are looking at you like you're not a good parent. My next door neighbor never spoke to me again after my son's death. So I think what I want young people to know is when they get to that point where they feel like, my son even wrote in a letter to us that we'd be better off without him. That is not true. The life of your life as a young person is affecting hundreds, if not thousands, of other people and their decisions. And your family, even if you're having a hard time with them, will be totally distraught at your loss. And so suicide is one of the bullying is the 3rd leading cause of teen suicide in our country. And so that's why it's so important to me.
Well, Shirley, thank you for your story. I know it's not easy to share things like that, but I think it's important for parents to hear it, because some parents might be in your shoes that have had children that have committed suicide, and other parents are they're seeing something, they're not quite sure what to do. So I think your perspective today is going to be extremely important. David, let's talk about your sort of your passion behind behind trying to prevent bullying.
Sure. My organization, the Riverside Medical Clinic Charitable Foundation, each year puts on a health lecture. And 2 years ago, we did a lecture on bullying, where we bring in experts to sit on a panel and discuss certain parts of bullying. And the audience at the time was made up of nearly 400 parents, school teachers, administrators. And so the reason why we decided to move forward this year on a program dedicated to bullying and addressing the issue is that the tears that flowed at the Q&A with the panel, the testimonials from parents who came and stood up in front of 400 other people at the microphone and said, "This is my story." Kids who came and stood up and said, "I'm being bullied. I need help. I don't know where else to go." Very, very powerful night. We continued to get calls and emails from parents saying, "We need more information. We don't know what to do. Our children are at the end of their rope. We're concerned about what they may do." That's really what led us to start this program, where we can actually work with these families, these parents, and these kids to drill down and understand what the issue is and how we can help them. So that's my personal story and my personal drive to start this anti-bullying program.
I think what you're saying is really incredible, because sometimes we don't really understand how big of an issue it is. And to have 400 parents and children show up and then say they want more information really shows that this is an issue that does need to be addressed. So.
And I will add that program prior to that would get maybe 100 people, and to get all of a sudden 400,
right.
It was incredible.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. Dr. Abdul Mumin, you've had 30 years of experience working with parents, children, families. I'm sure you've seen a lot in your experience. What is what's behind your passion towards getting involved with the anti-bullying initiatives?
I think I am a native. I know I'm a native, but I think because I was a native of South Central Los Angeles, I grew up in a very tough neighborhood. And it's funny because culturally you see it differently. We didn't think of it as bullying. It was like survival. You know, how do you go to school and come back and nothing happened? So I saw a lot of that as a youth. And then in terms of my own, I didn't experience bullying until I came in the professional environment, which is amazing. So all those years growing up, I was never bullied. But once I hit the professional world, I experienced some bullying. But I think I've worked in the youth authority, the prisons, university, different settings. And one of my areas is, especially within the prison, and then we have youth who are at continuation schools, is to teach them how to manage aggressive, assaultive behavior. So we're looking at the end of people who could potentially get in some serious trouble. And so we go into the schools, I do it with my youth, and it's become something very common. And in my program, for example, we teach principles that we would call African-centric, and we try to teach them, one, principles of Ma'at, control your thoughts and control your actions. And that just those two simple principles could protect them from not only being bullied, but especially bullying. So we begin to teach, we do role play around that different area. But also as a clinical psychologist, I get youth who have been bullied. And sometimes just very nice kids, not being biased, all ethnicities, but a lot of my clients are African American. And they come to me, parents are having difficulties. They don't know why the kid doesn't want to go to school. They don't know why the kid doesn't have a lot of friends. And what's going on is something is unpleasant at school. So it starts with verbal, and then they begin to hit the kids. And as we'll talk about later, the most important thing is that these young kids come and talk about it. But most of them won't. They're caught in the culture of the school, which is to be cool or to avoid it. So that's where I begin to see it more recently, that youth are having serious problems, parents are not understanding the problems, and then trying to make the connection not only with the bullied, but the bullying and the problems that they can have. So we see the psychological issues, which is what you were talking about, but we also see people get in serious trouble.
Excellent. And I think what's interesting about this panel is that there's so many different perspectives. I mean, there's children that get bullied, there's parents that dealing with children that are being bullied or have unfortunately committed suicide, and there's professional bullying. And I think one of the first questions that I want to ask the panel is, you know, what is bullying? It's sort of in this sort of catch-all phrase for a lot of different things. And the reason why, even though this program is being sponsored by the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire chapter, we realize that bullying crosses all color lines, gender, ethnicity, race, and so we wanted to put together a program that can address bullying, you know, across all those different areas. But the first question I would ask, if I'm a parent and I'm trying to understand this subject, what is bullying? You know, what is it? And Shirley, we'd like you to start with, how would you define bullying?
Well, bullying is a behavior that is aggressive either verbally or physically, repeatedly. So I think it has to be categorized as repeatedly and unwanted. I think we put too many situations into this lump sum called bullying. And you know, if you cry wolf so many times, pretty soon it's just another word that we toss out there and we can't deal with it where the problem really is. Because kids are going to be mean to each other today, and tomorrow they're best friends. I mean, every parent knows that. Right. You've got your kids squabbling and one hits the other, and then you decide to jump in and they go, "No, Mom, get away, and now they're best friends. So we can't say that that was a bullying situation. So it has to be something that is unwanted and it is repetitive, that happens more than just once, in my opinion.
Okay. And David, we were talking earlier before the show, and you had added something in addition to what Shirley was saying about your perspective on the definition of bullying.
Well, and she touched on it, though. The key part is that it's unwanted. So, as we know, bullies pick out kids they perceive as weak, and they're looking for a reaction. And so once those kids exhibit a reaction of "I don't want this, leave me alone," or whatever it may be, the action is going to continue. So, but the key is that it's not wanted. Shirley brought up a great point. There's kids who give each other a hard time. We talked about that a little bit earlier. You're on the basketball court and you're gonna talk to each other, and that's all in good fun. It's sort of part of the culture, if you will, of the game and of the playground. But again, when it gets across that line where, listen, you're continuing to do it over and over, and I'm telling you to stop, and you're not listening, and you're not following my advice, that's when it becomes an issue potentially of bullying.
I think it's important in the workplace. There are certain laws, regulations around that. You have an HR department you can go to, and you have somebody to talk to if you feel like you're being treated the wrong way or getting unwanted attention directed at you. In the school system, it's a little bit different because of peer pressure. Dr. Abdul Mumin, you mentioned, but wanting to be cool. And so I think defining it is important. And for you, Dr. Abdul Mumin, can you give your perspective on why does bullying happen? So for the children that are watching this program, they can at least understand that, because they might be questioning themselves, why me? Why is this happening? So from your perspective, why does it happen?
And I'm going to take it I'm a martial artist, from the martial arts perspective. And what our sensei would teach us, and he said, if you're walking through a parking lot or someplace, don't look like a victim. Don't look like someone that's afraid. Keep your head up. Be vigilant. So unfortunately, we don't raise our children with strength. So if you're on a sports team, you're different from somebody who is not physically, psychologically. So, so a lot of the ones who become victims, they don't understand that process, and they're fearful. And sometimes they're nice-looking young kids, athletic, but psychologically they're fearful. They don't want to deal with that situation. And the bully is looking for someone who is weak, quote unquote, not a good word, but who is vulnerable, who can be taken advantage of. And they may only be joking and having fun, but within our school system, it becomes popular to be a bully, just like it's popular to be on the football team or whatever. So it's upside down. The good kids are at the bottom and the other kids are at the top, but they take advantage of those other ones who can't protect themselves. And there are many, many psychological reasons, but some of them, and I'd say antisocial features. That is, don't really respect or care about the rights of others. And they will do things to get attention, to get recognized at school, etc. So it's kind of in their mindset, but the victim also has some things that they need to do to stop that. Some kids can fight and they're afraid to fight. They can fight and stop it, but they're just locked in.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing all of us saying is that there's a mental or emotional aspect on both parts, the part of the bully and the person being bullied. And there's a great book by James Allen, As a Man Thinketh, which there's a quote in there that says, thought is the ancestor of action. Yeah. Before there's an action, there's a thought, whether it's a thought of how you're going to respond to being bullied, or the thought of why the behavior or the thought behind the behavior of bullying someone. So I'd like to sort of, as we go throughout today's program, sort of speak to that a little bit more and help parents and children understand, how do we address sort of helping our children understand the mental aspects of being bullied and bullying, what can be done to build confidence and self-esteem and those types of things.
If I could interject, I was asked to talk about bullying at one particular thing, and I came up with 10 tips to help to bully-proof your kid.
Okay.
But I had heard this at a workshop, so I'm not taking credit for it. But one thing is to help your children with the concept of walk tall, look people in the eye, and smile. Show an air of confidence, which is what you're talking about.
Yes.
And one other thing that I think, I'm not going to give all 10, but one other thing that I think is really critical for parents is to help your child find their island of competence. Every child has a gift. And it may not be the gift you want them to have. It may not be basketball, or it may not be football or whatever, but it might be art or something else. And then help them explore that so they feel like they are great at something. That, I think, helps to build their self-confidence. And then when someone is coming at them, they know inside that that there is something about them that is special. Because too often they are listening to the words that the bully is saying, and they need to change that thought pattern in their own head.
I think that's a very good point. Last year, this is my personal story about bullying. I was verbally bullied as a child, and I wrote a book that talks about that, called You're Ugly, which is a children's book. But in that book, I listed 7 things that parents can do to help build confidence and self-esteem in their children, because I have a daughter who's in the 7th grade, and I will tell you the words kids are saying these days, the things they're exposed to will blow your mind. And the majority of bullying happens between that, junior high, middle school age and high school. And so she's right at that point. And one of the things that I mentioned in there was to find their gifts and then help them to explore areas and find individuals that are like-minded. For example, they might like acting. There's acting clubs and things like that, so they could be around people who are like them instead of feeling like they're sort of on an island, and things of that nature. So I think, Shirley, what you're saying is very important, and we'll talk about some more steps and tips throughout the program. There's 2 different major buckets of bullying. There's verbal bullying and there's physical bullying. And I'd like to, number one, talk about, ask the panel, which one is more detrimental to the young adult or the child, and what are the effects of being verbally or physically bullied, short term and then long term? And David, let's start with you.
Yeah, we talked about this a little before the show. I'm sort of on the fence. I feel like they're equally as detrimental to a child, both physical and emotional. My thought is on short term, and we really are focused on the schools with our program and helping those kids. And if you think about it, kids that are being bullied, they have a hard time learning. And if you put yourself in their shoes for a moment, imagine you're sitting there and the teacher is going through the lesson, and all you're thinking about is, in 10 minutes that bell's going to ring, and I'm going to get jumped. So they're not listening to what's being taught. And that's on a daily basis. The other part that I think all of us can talk to, and you mentioned a little bit, when we were kids, when we were being bullied, once we made it home, we were safe. It may have been a struggle to get home.
Right.
You might have had to run all the way home. But when you made it home, you were safe, and you can kind of take a breath and process until you had to go back 12, 14 hours later. The kids nowadays with online and texting, they cannot escape it. Right. And that's a huge component that needs to be addressed, because the pressure, the anxiety that creates for these kids is immense. So going back to school, their grades are suffering. You mentioned the 160,000 kids across the U.S. that miss school every day because they're scared. They're not going to school. So it's a real critical problem that needs to be addressed. So again, I think both sides of the issue, emotional and physical, are equally as devastating.
David, that's a very good point. I think one of the areas you mentioned that hasn't been brought up yet to this point is cyberbullying. Now, I didn't show any statistics on that, but literally it's just as big, if not bigger, than typical verbal or physical bullying, with all the Twitter, the Facebook, and if you look at your children's smartphones and devices and you go through it, you'll see some things that will probably make your hair stand on end. And so it's a serious issue. And so, Dr. Abdul Momin, as a clinical psychologist, what are your thoughts on verbal versus physical bullying, and include cyberbullying, and what's more detrimental, and how can those two areas be addressed?
Good question. I think one way to look at it is short-term, long-term, and physical bullying is normally short-term. I remember growing up, my mother would say, sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And we find out now that psychologically, that's where the problem occurs. So depression and the symptoms that go with depression, and the reason depression is so serious is most of the people who commit suicide are depressed in the general population. So that's where the long term becomes more problematic. And then when you add in cyberbullying, here are people unknown laughing at you, putting your name or your pictures or whatever. And so not only is it individual, but you have this group or you have this media effect. So that becomes very serious. And we've seen people in families intact, very resilient, but they could not stand up to cyberbullying and they commit suicide. So it's more serious when it stays physical. And you remember as a kid, you got a spanking. It hurt, but next day you're okay. But if you got beat up verbally, if you got called a name, if somebody created a negative name for you, that would stick with you. So we're more worried about the psychological. However, the physical means pushing to violence, to, as we have seen, young men at schools just take out a gun and shoot everybody. So it can go very wrong on the physical level, and they don't have the coping skills. So their expression is, I'm going to hurt somebody. That's their recognition. Their expression is, I'm going to kill somebody, knowing jail, all that stuff, but the notoriety that they get evidently is worth it. So I think it's a combination of both, but we're more worried about the psychological, because normally we can fix people on the physical side.
You know, I mentioned earlier that my daughter's in the 7th grade, and I'm seeing more and more programs at schools, anti-bullying programs. For example, when she was in middle school, they had a program called Stand Up to Bullying, which they had kids that would act as leaders on campus to help talk to kids that seemed like they were being affected by bullying. They'd have this bench on campus where if a student felt like they needed someone to talk to, they would just go there and sit down, and then a student would come up and sit down and talk to them. Now that she's in the 7th grade, they have a program called WEB, which is the 8th grade students, and there's hundreds of them because their school has like 1,200 students that help to mentor the 7th grade students. They help them to sort of get acclimated to 7th grade and junior high. And so I see the school starting to get more involved. So I have a two-part question. The first part is, what can parents do to help their child that is being bullied on one hand, and then if you're someone that's watching this program right now that's being bullied, what can we tell them to help them sort of deal with it, address it, and have a change in how they're being treated at school? So David, let's start with you.
I think taking one step back, if you look at more of a preventative measures, right, instead of addressing the issue once it's already in full bloom, or there's bullying that's happening on the campus with kids. Not to say that those kids are a lost cause by any stretch of the imagination. However, I think it's important to start at a younger age and begin to understand what can we do with kids to prepare them. We all know there's going to be bullying. You're going to get bullied. You're going to see it. You're going to witness it. It's how you handle it that's going to determine the course of your childhood and your education. So one of the big things that we focus in on is empathy, is teaching your kids empathy. And research has shown that kids that have empathy for one another are not going to, A, generally going to be bullies, and B, is if you're not the bully, and you're one of the outliers, right? So you have maybe 5% that are bullies, and you have 5% that are targets, and you have the other 90% that are kind of on the outside looking in. They're afraid to jump in because they don't want to become the target. They also don't want to put themselves out there and become a bully as well. So I think empathy training, teaching your kids at a young age. If you see one of your classmates that fell and they hurt their knee, go up, are you okay? How can I help you? And it's something that these kids, as we know, when they're so young, they're like sponges. And if you model that behavior at a young age, the chances that they are going to be bullied or become a bully or be able to handle it in a good manner increases. So empathy. That's what I would put.
As you say that, I think of Shirley's program, Simple Acts of Care and Kindness, and that keeps playing in my head. So Shirley, talk about it from a parent's perspective and from your program and how you help.
Well, my foundation, the Simple Acts of Care and Kindness program, has established the World Kindness Youth Conference, and we are doing that with fourth graders. Somebody asked me, well, why fourth grade? Why not another grade? Well, we bring all of them from the Corona Norco Unified School District into a conference, and that's over 4,000 fourth graders. The reason we selected fourth grade is because that's the age where, it does start in third grade, but at fourth grade we felt like they were more easily able to comprehend the things we wanted to offer. And so what we've done is we've brought in speakers who have wonderful stories to tell about their experience and to gain empathy through that speaker. And then we also have Grandma Rose, who gives them 5 things that they can do if they are being bullied. And the kids go away. They remember every one of them. She's very good at that. And then we also give them experiences. We have activities, and every activity is designed to teach kids about caring and kindness, whether it's they are in a wheelchair and they have to manipulate an obstacle course so they can have empathy for what it's like to be disabled. We have exercises in what it's like to be dyslexic, to be vision impaired, animals, empathy and compassion for the world around them. And then we've challenged the schools to be the caring school of the year, and we give these ginormous trophies. We have 3 of them to the schools that come up with projects and activities that are going on a year-round basis so that they're focusing on it. Because in the school system, you need to have everybody on the same playing field. That everybody is looking for, I think if you're looking for acts of kindness, you're going to grow acts of kindness. If you're looking for bullying, you're going to grow bullying. So it's what you look for and what you reward is what you get. And we've had experiences where teachers have said 6th graders are coming in tattling on kids about the acts of kindness they saw them do on the playground. That's amazing. But you have to have the noon aide, you have to have the teachers, the bus drivers, the principal, everybody recognizing kids when they're doing acts of kindness. The more you recognize it, the more you're going to get it. And the same applies to parents. And I think that as parents, getting kids involved in community service of some sort, so therefore, as parents, you need to get involved in community service. You need to show that when your neighbor just lost their grandfather, you go down with a plate of cookies. Your children will see that an act of kindness is something that our family stands for. And then the children can emulate that as they grow.
You mentioned the parent's perspective. I want to get Dr. Abdul Momin's perspective on this as well, but I remember when our daughter was growing up and she really got into shopping and things that I just don't like, shopping and talking about boy bands, and I would not want to listen and I would just sort of, tune out. And my wife came to me one day, she said, "You know what you're doing?" I said, "No." She said, "The more that you don't listen to the stuff she's interested in, you may not be interested in it, but the more that you aren't there to listen to the boy band discussion or to hear what happened at school and things of that nature, you're pushing her away." So I changed my whole perspective, which is what you're saying, and I got involved in everything that was going on, and I would have her tell me what happened at school and listen to everything she said. I became very interested. And so I think part of this program is to help parents, sort of be honest with themselves, like I just did, and understand what can we do. I'm sure you work with a lot of parents who are saying, Dr. Abdul Mumin, this is my issue. My child is experiencing this, and I don't quite know what to do. So once again, speak to those parents out there and give them a couple of things they can do to really not reconnect, but to understand what their children are going through so they can be a part of it and help them.
And let me do some of this cross-culturally. I'm a member of the Association of Black Psychologists, and so we've been looking within that cultural framework, but then all the framework. But I say on a larger level, we're dealing with or attempting to address cultural issues that have become common and normal. And we're not seeing the values, what you were just talking about, take the cookies. We're not seeing anything philosophical being taught to these children at a young age about what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong. And we don't get involved until there's a problem. So I think that certain principles have to be taught. So this is what we're now trying to do within our cultural framework within the African American community, is study some of the positive principles that have been in our culture and that have kind of disappeared with the modern age. And spirituality is also important in that process. So all these good things come from these areas, but they're not being transmitted. So it's the TV, it's the music. I happened to stumble on MTV Music Awards the other day. I don't know how anybody could survive after watching that show if they don't have a solid set of values going into it. So each community is different, and there is the sociological aspect, which is how do you teach coping skills? How do you teach navigation skills? And I don't remember learning it, but somehow I knew how to get, like you said, from school to home. Go through a backyard, whatever, rough somebody, have 5 friends. But this is important information. A child should not be alone. That should not be part of the paradigm of growing up. So we have family, we have community, we have all these important things that we do. But one example, there's a book called Cool Pose. And they said, well, why are black people so cool? Where did that come from? So an author wrote a book on Cool Pose talking about from Africa to America, how you deal with your enemy or whoever. So you play cool. It's actually a coping style. Instead of nervous or afraid, I'm cool. I can't fight for a penny.
You won't know that. Right?
Yeah, you won't know that because the guy is looking at how you walk. We had one guy when we grew up in school, and so nobody ever approached him. And one day somebody told a joke and he smiled. And we said, that guy has another side to him.
Yeah.
But that was his cool pose to protect him from these different issues. So our children don't understand that. They're now victims of the culture and the system. And they say, run, don't tell, all these difficult situations that they get put into. So we need to teach them strategies, but we also need to go back to the good old values. And our children should know them. Just sit somebody down and ask them, how important is religion? So if it's a religious family, it's okay. Or you could say, how important is spirituality? What do you learn from that? Where do you get your positive values?
I think too, what I see as a father of 2 young children, 8 and 6-year-olds, the peer groups, the parents, and you'll see it, and we've all seen it. You go to a restaurant and they don't talk because mom and dad are on phones, kids are on their phones, and I know, I can attest, it's easy to say, here, leave daddy alone, he's had a long day, play a video game. But it's our responsibility as parents. When you had that child, you assumed a responsibility. You need to raise that child.
Yes.
And I think too often nowadays, parents and kids don't talk. It's a fast society. We're working, we're commuting, the kids are in 3 different sports and this and that and the other. There's not that family time where everyone's disconnected. And the older they get, the harder it's gonna be.
Yes.
So start younger, talk to your kids. And I have one piece of advice that my wife and I both agree on, thankfully, is you only have one chance to raise your kids.
Oh, really?
You need to
Yeah.
invest every bit of energy and make sacrifices because it'll pay off down the road. If you don't make that investment now, you're going to have a lifetime of issues with your kids and yourself. So make that investment, talk to your kids, communicate, and yeah, you should be good.
I just wanted to comment on just an example. I have a brilliant daughter. I just wanted y'all to know that. And I also have a 7th grade granddaughter. And she was having some rough times. And my daughter found out over the summer that because of the work she does, she works at home. And so when my granddaughter would come home, then she would have to go and do whatever she was doing. And my daughter was focused on her work. And so she tried for the whole summer then to change that paradigm. And every time my granddaughter came in the room, she actually gave her full focused attention, total focused attention. And over the summer, we could see a totally different person emerging, a much happier, my granddaughter was much happier, and things just worked so much better. But it was because my daughter had the foresight to realize I'm not giving her what she needs. And so she gave her that attention, and it made a huge difference in her.
Well, and that's such an important point, Shirley, because, you know, let me speak to the parents out there who say, you know, I don't have time. I'm a single parent. I'm working 2 jobs. I can't be around my kids as much as I would like. And so that's the reality of a lot of households. So I think there are things that even those parents can do. And I think one of the things you're saying is it's not the amount of time, because, you know, if we have to go to work, we're at work. We have to do certain things, we have to do certain things. But when we're with our children, to sit down and talk. And so what are some things they can do to
Laser beam attention.
Laser beam attention, eye contact, you know, look at their schoolwork. You know, take 5 minutes. Okay, what did you study today? If they're reading a book, ask about what they learned. It's those little things that will help to build that bond. If you're paying for their phone, then guess what? You should be able to look at their phone. At least that's how we do it in our household. And so see what's happening. What's the communication? I think over time that just builds that bond with your children. So there are ways to spend quality time with children, even if you don't have a lot of time as a parent, which is the reality of a lot of situations.
And you hit it right in the head. It's quality, not quantity. There's only so many hours in the day. Yes, our children need to be the priority, but you also need to work to put food on the table for your children and a roof over their heads. One thing that we practice in my house that I learned at a workshop as well is when we put the kids to bed. Now, granted, our kids are younger, but each of us, my wife and I, lay with a child for 10 minutes. And there's every outside distraction is gone. You're just laying in bed and you just talk. And it's important for you to listen. Because when they get to be teenagers, and you know, I don't want to tell you anything about what's going on. I don't want you butting in my business. If you kind of lay the groundwork, give them that just 10 minutes. How was your day? Well, you know, what happened? And they'll open up eventually, and that'll translate into open communication when it really matters, when they become teenagers and young adults.
As long as you're not lecturing.
Right. No, you're listening. You're listening.
You're listening, exactly.
Which is hard. Hard not to lecture, but yeah.
It is. It's very hard not to lecture.
Well, and before we go to Dr. Abdul Momin, I want to get your perspective on what can children do if they're being bullied? What are the steps a child can take? There's one more point for parents, though, which I've learned, and my dad actually taught me this growing up, and that is have them get exposed to self-help programs. My dad had me reading How to Win Friends and Influence People at age 12, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Books like that, and you go, oh, this is really interesting. It teaches a mindset, and you realize that the world is bigger than what you see in front of you. So there's programs out there, your organization, your organizations that can help, and we'll provide the contact information for those organizations. But there are a lot of things that parents can do to get help. You know, you're not, you know, we think that children feel like they're alone. Sometimes parents feel like they're alone too, and you're not alone. We're all parents, we're all being equally affected by it, and we can all help each other. So, Dr. Abdul Momin, let's transition over to our children. I'm in school, and all this sounds great, you know, nice panel and everything, but I'm afraid for that bell to ring because I know what's going to happen to me. If I'm experiencing that, and that's my reality, what can I do?
Do you really want me to answer? No, my best friend happens to be my 19-year-old son. And he talks, we talk. We're both in the martial arts. He actually started some MMA, but later he began to tell me about elementary school. So he went to elementary school. He had never been to a public school, parochial school. And he said, "Hey, how are you guys doing?" And they were like, "Little Buddha, what's wrong with you?" So, and then they started to pick on him. And the only thing that saved him, I ran a summer program at UCR. His brother was in the summer program, and all these heavyweight kids and their friends, they knew of him. And then there's always this conflict. Dad say, "You need to do something about it." Mom say, "Do not get in trouble." And you put children in a very difficult situation. So the number one thing is they need to be safe and talk to you, able to talk to you about the situation. So he would talk about, "What do I do?" And I couldn't tell him what I did when I was a kid, but he would talk about that. So I said, "Well, stay out of the bathroom, make more friends, get involved with people who," because we live in a society where it's based on individualism, but we function in groups. For survival, for money, the family is a group unit. So they need to know how to build a strong group of friends. So when I grew up, there were all these strong groups, right? And so I had the protection in there. So I think many of them have to learn to make friends and fit in, and this is where the values come. Make sure it's appropriate, because that's how some good kids get in trouble. They'll go to the bad group to have the protection and the company, but then that can lead to other problems. So he was able to overcome those issues at school. And later he told me, I said, "So what's going on?" He said, "Well, you know, I actually had to fight a couple of times." And I said, "Well, why'd you fight?" He said, "Because they wouldn't stop." And eventually it stopped. And this is terrible to tell parents, and you know, but here's a little kid stuck within the school situation. So we told him not to fight, don't do anything to avoid it. But for whatever reason, he overcame that. Never got in trouble for anything physical or whatever, because the school is, I mean, most teachers and administrators are blind to what goes on in the bathroom and all that stuff, unfortunately. But I think the fact that we kept communication, the fact that I could empathize, I could see people bigger than you picking on you, and he was smaller at that time, and the bully doesn't care. The biggest bully would pick on the smallest kids. So that communication was important. Being able to understand that, yes, you can get beat up or pushed around in school. I have to admit. And you may have feelings of wanting to strike back. That's all part of the process. However, we really want you to go to school and become a good student. So trying to help him negotiate through that process. And most of us are successful. At some age, it stops. But we're worried about the damage that it does when it's happening. Okay, but most of us grow out of or mature physically or whatever, and we don't have to worry about it. So, but I think the empathy, the communication with your child, having your child be able to come to you and say, "Somebody hit me today. They pushed me yesterday." There's one outstanding little client, and then I'll stop. I won't go too far, that I had. And he was being bullied. And so I said, "Well, what's going on? They don't like you?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I want to be around them, but they always push on me and hit on me." So he can be a part of the crowd, but he was the punching bag in the crowd. And so we did homework, like what you would do with your program. So I said, "I want you to go to school, and when they come your way, walk another way. Go close to a teacher or whatever. Don't say anything, don't have a conflict, but just automatically walk another way." I said, "I want you to make a couple of friends of people who are not part of that group, but they're strong people on the campus." So he'd come back, "I have 2 friends now. I like the 2 friends." So you begin to build and teach them how to do that, because otherwise they don't know. They just get in a corner and they're afraid. And he actually was able to go back to school. He was getting ready to move to another school. It was so bad. The other point was the parents. Some parents are so strict, they blame the child, like blaming the victim. It must be your fault, and on and on and on. And then you put your child in a corner because you're being blamed for other people picking on you. When the environment, as we know, it dictates that sometimes. Some schools are worse than other schools, and you may want to pull your child out. But the principles that you're talking about and the things that you do, that's what we have to begin to do to teach them to cope. It's a matter of coping skills and to be resilient. So they're saying things, but you don't have to let it get to you. Go to cool pose.
Cool pose. I like
Yeah.
that might catch on. That might catch on.
I was just going to say that when we do our conference, Grandma Rose, her name is Karen Gettig Burnett, but she goes by the name Grandma Rose. The 5 things that she tells the kids, and I don't know if I'll remember all 5, but one is walk away. One is make a joke. You know, you say, gosh, you're ugly. You should have seen me this morning before I put on my makeup. You know? So you diffuse it. Distract. So you say something mean to me. Well, look, did you see that over there? Anyway, I don't have them all, but she has 5 specific things that she teaches the kids, and they do remember them, and they do work, because the kids who are still whining and crying about having been treated mean are the ones they're going to pick on every time. She uses the analogy of fishing. She throws out the hook, and if you bite it because you're crying and you're upset and you're going, you can't do that to me, then I've got one. But if you just walk away, she calls it swim free. Then you go play somewhere, and this kid has to figure out, well, what happened? They didn't bite. So now they're out of the pool of who to bully. So it's a matter of having some strategies like that that can help a child.
That's a very good point. I think another aspect that, before we look at the side of the bullies, I want to talk about how do we talk to the bullies that may be watching this program. And that is a question of to tell or not to tell. And we're taught, don't tell anybody, don't snitch, keep it to yourself. And we talked earlier about the detriment of not saying something. Oftentimes children think if I do tell someone, it's going to be bad. But I want the children to really understand, if you don't tell someone and you keep everything inside of you, it gets even worse. It does lead to depression. You do feel more alienated. And I want them to understand that there are so many programs now at schools that makes it comfortable and acceptable for children to go to a teacher, go to a counselor, go to friends at their school who are part of the anti-bullying club and things like that, and you have support. So please just consider the detriment of not saying something and how you feel right now compared to what if you do say something and your life does change and the bullying does stop and you can go to school and feel safe. So I want them to really feel that before we talk about the side of the bully. And David, I'll throw this question at you. I was watching this show about this kid that was bullied, and they interviewed the father of the child that had bullied this other child. And the father said, well, if this boy had been tougher, my son wouldn't have picked on him. So, and it was alarming to hear, but I would imagine that the reality is some parents do think that way. I want my child to be tough and to be strong and to not put up with anything, and if a child can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. How would you address children or kids or young adults that are bullying other children?
That's a very slippery slope. As a school, or you identify a child who's a bully, and you have to go look at the family unit. There's something going on at the home that's leading to this child, whether the parents are just not there and they're looking for attention, or they're being bullied. They've been brought up in an environment where fighting and being the tough guy is the way you're supposed to deal with things. But generally, when we talk to parents of kids who are the bullies, we generally get 2 reactions. One is, no, they're not. They're not a bully. You don't know what you're talking about. Or, yeah, and what are you going to do about it? So it's a very interesting dynamic that we see. But I think generally, kids who are bullies, if you think about it, they're natural leaders. They're just redirecting. They're just directing their energy in the wrong way. So I think you need to pull them aside and get them to see to see life different, to see, maybe show them almost like a scared straight. If you keep going down this road, this is where you're going to head. You have a great ability. Reinforce their self-esteem. A lot of them have low self-esteem, and that's why they're doing this. You need to build them back up in a positive manner and show them, hey, this is where you can go, and get them involved as a leader on campus, on schools, and look at that positive feedback, which they probably maybe haven't had too much of, and they go, wow, it feels pretty good. And they have more friends, they're more accepted, and I think it's a difficult road, I'm not going to lie, but one that can be accomplished with just a lot of work with these kids.
Absolutely. Let's have one more point regarding helping kids that are bullying other kids, and then we're going to wrap up and talk about some final things for parents and children to consider regarding this bullying issue. So Dr. Abdul Momin, anything else you'd like to share with someone that's watching the program that may have bullied someone else?
I would try and teach the empathy that we're talking about, because they have been bullied, guarantee, by an adult or someone. And that's how we see that cycle in abuse. The abuser has been abused, and so on and so forth. So there's something inside that can identify. And a lot of times, putting them in a positive leadership role, which what you're talking about. So that bad guy wants attention. So he can get attention being the leader of the multicultural club at school, or being involved in the multicultural club, or something of a different nature. So they get stuck in getting the attention in a negative way. And we have to try to help them get attention in a positive way, and they get the same reward. If you can get them to talk about it, and you say, why do you do this? Because it makes me feel big. Because they get to push people around. So let's change the environment. So here's a club at school, and they go out and plant trees and try to improve the look of the school. So you can get the same reward, probably get even more attention, being the leader of this group that plants trees and beautifies the school. So sometimes they're stuck in this cultural thing that we're talking about, which is what society gives them versus what they could be. And if you look at the so-called kids who don't have problems and who are leaders, somehow they're dynamic leaders, but they never get involved in the negative. And that's what you say, it could be the parents, it could be whatever is going on. And there are some really aggressive parents, very aggressive parents. So we have the little martial arts tournaments, and when they're little, the boys and girls compete. And this kid comes out with a black uniform, a red thing tied around his head. And we had to stop it. He was going to just take this little girl apart, and the dad was on the sideline saying, what? Get her, get her, get her. So it came from the home. Dad wanted to see and reinforce, as you would say, the positive reinforcement, that negative behavior, as opposed to reinforcing another type of inappropriate behavior. Same energy is there, so the energy could be good on this side or bad on that side. So I think there's hope, and it's how we deal with it. But I think the school system is so complicated. There's a very small percentage of youth, and they don't develop, they already have it. So we put them on all these good roles. But then there's another group, they can do it, but they don't have it naturally. They've never had the opportunity to be a leader, to do anything.
Right.
And the easiest way is to go with the bad guys, like the little kid that I was working with. He thought he can get attention there, and he got bullied there. You know, so finally he figured out how to get an appropriate group of friends.
I think if there's one other thing I'd like parents to think about, is not making your kids a victim. I think that we are living in a victimology society where everybody is a victim. And rather than treating your child as a victim, show them their strengths and how they can come out of that.
Excellent, excellent. We have a couple minutes left, and I would like each of you to sort of summarize your perspectives on how do we help parents and children address bullying, and if there's one or two things you could tell a parent and a child watching this program, what would you want them to hear? So, Shirley, we'll start with you.
What I would want them to know is that bullying is always going to be with us, and so it's our job to build the child.
David?
I think if you're being bullied, understand it's not your fault. It's really the issue of the kid that's bullying you. They're the ones that have problems at home, at school, whatever. So don't internalize it. I know it's hard. It's easier for me to say than actually practice. But understand that you're a great person, and this other child is the one that has the problem. So don't internalize it. And then parents, again, we talked about empathy and communication. Those two things you can't go wrong.
Excellent. Dr. Abdul-Momin?
I think within the school, so I'm going, it's a group of us, and we go to continuation schools and even some youth authority facilities and teach youth about management of assortive behavior, about control of thought, control of action, teach the parents about the same thing. So we're not doing preventive things anymore. It's when there's a problem, they take it, and they should actually be exposed to it earlier, especially if you know that's a problem in the community. Because sometimes the community is good, but then there's some bad, quote unquote, apples. So what I do with my program, Rites of Passage program, is that we have modules dealing with aggression, anger management, all those different issues. And the parents must be involved. We have parent empowerment dinners. This is what we're teaching your youth, so that they can learn about what aggression is. And aggression is not good. That's the same as hitting somebody. So be it cyber, verbal, or physical. So, and somehow the school needs to be a part of that. And if they say, well, we can't do that type of thing, I'd say, well, if you can do sex education, you can do violence. Anger management education.
That's a very good point. And I think for me, I would add in closing, I would want both the parent and the child to know they're not alone. I think from a parent's perspective, you're not alone. There are resources to help parents. There are support groups. There's books you can read. There's organizations you can be a part of. You know, if you don't have a lot of time, just spend your time that you do have in building a child's confidence and self-esteem. It doesn't take a lot of time to build someone up, to say a positive word, to encourage them, and that's all things that we can do that doesn't take a lot of time and can really help parents to help their child. I think for the children of today, there's so many programs out there to help them. They're not alone. There are schools who want to help them. There's parents who want to help them. There's other children on campus that want to help them. So the worst thing that anyone can do is to feel like you're alone and you can't go to someone. And I want the children to understand, go to someone, because it's much more difficult in life to face life on your own. So there are support groups and there are people out there that really want to work with you. So Shirley, I want to thank you very much. Dr. Abdul-Momin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
David, thank you very much. It's a phenomenal discussion. I'm sure it's going to really help a lot of parents and children deal with this bullying issue. So once again, I want to thank our guests, David Lewis, Shirley Zink, and Dr. Abdul-Momin for being part of today's program. I also would like to thank the 100 Black Men of America Inland Empire chapter for sponsoring today's program and taking a leadership role in addressing the bullying issue. Be on the lookout for more programs brought to you by the 100 Black Men of the Inland Empire chapter, as they are committed to providing programs that address and provide solutions to the most difficult challenges affecting today's youth. Finally, I would like to sincerely thank each and every one of you that has taken the time to view this program. Hopefully you've gained some valuable information and insights that can help you and your children conquer bullying once and for all. Thank you all very much.